They laughed when the poor boy mounted the weakest horse in the stable. But when he crossed the finish line, no one in the stands could hold back the silence. The gray light of dawn had barely begun to seep through the gaps in the trailer's thin curtains when Joey Miller opened his eyes. For a moment, he lay still on his narrow cot, listening to the labored breathing of his grandmother in the next room. He didn't need an alarm clock anymore. His body had adjusted to this early rhythm over months of necessity. Careful not to make the floorboards creak, Joey slipped out from under his threadbare blanket and padded to the small bathroom. The mirror reflected a face too serious for 15. Hollow cheeks, dark circles under eyes that had seen more hardship than childhood. He splashed cold water on his face, not bothering with the unreliable hot water heater this early. In the kitchenette, he filled the kettle and set it on the stove, then moved to his grandmother's doorway. Betty Miller lay small and fragile against her pillows, her once robust frame now barely making a dent in the mattress. Cancer had a way of shrinking people, Joey had observed, not just in body but in presence. Except her eyes, when open, they still held all the fierce love and determination they always had. The array of medication bottles on her bedside table had grown again after yesterday's doctor visit. Joey checked each label carefully, sorting the morning doses into a small plastic cup. When the kettle whistled, he silenced it quickly and prepared her tea with a spoonful of honey, one of the small luxuries he made sure they could afford. "I'll leave your breakfast and medicine here, Grandma," he whispered, though he knew she was still deep in the exhausted sleep that followed her pain medication. "I'll be back after my shift at Dalton's." She stirred slightly, murmuring something unintelligible. Joey leaned down and pressed a kiss to her papery forehead before gathering his worn backpack. Inside were his lunch, a peanut butter sandwich and an apple, and a dog-eared library book he'd been reading in snatches between jobs. Outside, the Kentucky morning greeted him with cool mist and the distant whinnying of horses from neighboring farms. Their trailer sat on a small plot at the edge of Oak Ridge, the last in a row of similar homes that housed those who served but could never afford to join the horse country aristocracy. Joey pulled his jacket tighter around his thin frame and began the familiar 5-mile walk to Dalton's Market. Most days he'd cut straight through town, but on quiet mornings like this, with no one watching, he took the longer route that passed by Darby Farms. The prestigious breeding and training facility sprawled over 300 acres of Kentucky's finest land. Its white fences and immaculate barns stood in stark contrast to the humble trailer Joey had just left. As he approached the eastern perimeter, he slowed his pace, eyes scanning for any early rising security guards. Finding his usual spot, a cluster of oak trees that provided cover while offering a clear view of the main training oval, Joey settled in, dropping his backpack at his feet. In the misty half-light, the scene before him took on an almost magical quality. Grooms led magnificent thoroughbreds through their morning routines, the animals' breath visible in the cool air, their coats gleaming despite the dim light. "Beautiful, aren't they?" came a soft voice in accented English. Joey jumped, turning to find Miguel Sanchez, Darby Farms' head groom, standing a few feet away. The older man's weathered face held no anger, only a quiet understanding. I'm sorry," Joey stammered. "I wasn't trespassing, just watching from outside the fence." Miguel waved away the apology. "You've been coming here for months. If we minded, we would have said something before." He nodded toward the horses. "You have a good eye. You watch how they move, not just how they look." Joey relaxed slightly. "My mom worked with horses before she died. Grandma says I got her way with them." "Ah," Miguel nodded. "The way you watch, it is with respect, not like tourists who see only beautiful animals or businessmen who see only money running on 4 legs." He gestured toward the main stable. "Come, the morning feed is happening. You can see closer if you help carry water buckets." Before Joey could respond, a sharp voice cut through the morning air. "Sanchez, who the hell is that with you?" Richard Whitfield strode toward them, his tailored riding clothes and polished boots marking him as clearly as a royal crest. In his late 50s, Whitfield moved with the confidence of a man accustomed to absolute authority. His face, once handsome, had hardened into permanent lines of calculation and contempt. "Just a local boy interested in horses, Mr. Whitfield," Miguel answered evenly, though Joey noticed how the groom's posture had stiffened. "This isn't a petting zoo," Whitfield snapped, his cold eyes appraising Joey from head to foot. "We have security for a reason." "He was outside the property, sir," Miguel explained. "I invited him in." Whitfield's mouth tightened into a thin line. "We don't need gawkers disrupting the training schedule. These animals are worth more than most people in this county will earn in a lifetime." Joey found his voice. "I wasn't disrupting anything, sir. I just like watching them train. They're magnificent animals." Something in the boy's earnest tone made Whitfield pause. He studied Joey more carefully, noting the threadbare jacket, the scuffed shoes, the too thin frame. Recognition dawned in his eyes. "You're Betty Miller's grandson, aren't you? The trailer park kid." It wasn't a question. Joey nodded, chin lifting slightly at the dismissive tone. "Your mother was Claire Miller," Whitfield continued, surprising Joey. "She had a way with difficult horses. Wasted talent. Could have made something of herself if she hadn't been so stubborn about natural methods." He made air quotes around the words, his contempt evident. Before Joey could defend his mother's memory, shouting erupted from the direction of the isolation barn, a separate structure set apart from the main stables. "Get the tranquilizer. He's going wild again," a man's voice called out in panic. Whitfield's attention immediately shifted. "Damn it, not again," he muttered, striding quickly toward the commotion. Miguel and Joey followed instinctively. At the isolation barn, 3 men were backing hurriedly away from a stall where violent crashing sounds emanated. Inside, Joey caught glimpses of a powerful black horse rearing and striking out, eyes rolling white with terror. Even in its frenzy, the animal's beauty was breathtaking. Coal black with a single white star on its forehead, muscles rippling under a coat that should have gleamed but was now dull with stress and fear. "That's the 3rd handler this week," one of the men was saying, holding a bloodied arm. "He nearly took my head off." "Thunder was supposed to be my Derby contender next year," Whitfield said tightly, watching the horse's rampage with cold calculation. $3 million of investment having a complete mental breakdown. "What happened to him?" Joey asked before he could stop himself. Whitfield glanced at him as if surprised he was still there. After a moment of apparent deliberation, he answered, "Training accident 6 weeks ago. Threw his rider, crashed through a fence. Nothing physically wrong with him anymore, but he's turned vicious. Won't let anyone near him." Joey watched the terrified animal, noticing the fresh scars on its flank and face. "He's scared," he said quietly, "not vicious." Whitfield's laugh was harsh. "Save the amateur psychology, kid. That horse has the best trainers money can buy, and none of them can get within 10 feet of him anymore." He turned to one of the handlers. "Get Dr. Warren on the phone. If we can't get him settled by the end of the month, we'll have to cut our losses." The clinical way Whitfield discussed the animal's fate sent a chill through Joey. He knew exactly what cutting losses meant in the horse business. "Sir," Joey said, surprising himself with his boldness, "maybe he just needs time and patience. My mom used to say that your mother's methods don't scale in modern horse racing." Whitfield interrupted dismissively. "This is business, not a feel-good animal rescue." A sleek SUV pulled up to the main house, drawing Whitfield's attention. "My investors are here. Miguel, get this situation under control." He turned to Joey with a cold smile. "Time for you to leave, kid. This isn't a place for trailer park tourists." As Whitfield walked away, Joey remained transfixed by the black horse, now pacing agitatedly in its stall. Even in distress, there was something majestic about the animal, a dignity that transcended its current state of fear. "His name is Thunder?" Joey asked Miguel. The groom nodded. "Midnight Thunder, officially. Direct descendant of Secretariat. Mr. Whitfield paid a record price for him as a yearling." Miguel's voice lowered. "The accident. It wasn't just an accident. The new trainer was using harsh methods. Equipment too tight, too much pressure too fast. Thunder panicked. Joey's eyes remained on the horse. "Can I come back? Just to see him?" Miguel looked skeptical. "This is not a good idea, muchacho. That horse is dangerous now. 3 handlers in the hospital already." "I won't try to touch him or go in his stall," Joey promised. "I just feel like he needs someone to see him. Really see him. Not just his value or his problems." Something in the boy's words resonated with Miguel, who studied him with newfound interest. "You sound like your mother. She came to work here briefly, years ago, before you were born. Mr. Whitfield fired her for questioning his methods." He sighed heavily. "Sunday mornings are quiet. No training. Most staff off. Come at 7. I will be here." Joey's heart leapt. "Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Now go, before you are late for whatever job a boy your age should not have to work," Miguel said kindly. Sunday couldn't come fast enough. Joey spent the intervening days researching everything he could about traumatized horses during his breaks and after his shifts. The town library had limited resources, but the librarian, who had a soft spot for the serious boy who devoured books despite his interrupted education, ordered him a specialized text from the county system. When Sunday morning finally arrived, Joey was at the service entrance to Darby Farms at 6:45. His backpack containing only a worn copy of Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, and an apple he'd saved from his lunch the day before. Miguel met him as promised, his expression serious. "Mr. Whitfield is in Louisville for a race. We have until evening." As they walked toward the isolation barn, he added, "No sudden movements. Stay away from the bars. He attacks without warning." The isolation barn was quiet, except for the occasional stamp of hooves. Thunder's stall was at the far end, separated from the others. As they approached, Joey could feel the tension emanating from the space. Through the heavy wooden bars, he could see the magnificent black horse moving restlessly, his once proud bearing now marked by agitation. The scars on his muzzle and flank stood out starkly against his dark coat, telling the story of his trauma more eloquently than words. "I'll leave you here," Miguel said. "I have duties, but I'll check on you. Remember, keep your distance." Left alone with Thunder, Joey simply sat down on the floor several feet from the stall. The horse immediately backed to the farthest corner, nostrils flaring, eyes darting nervously. Instead of trying to approach or coax the animal, Joey pulled out his book, opened to the first page, and began to read aloud in a low, steady voice. He was an old man who fished alone in a skiff in the Gulf Stream, and he had gone 84 days now, without taking a fish. For nearly an hour, Joey read continuously, his voice neither rising nor falling, creating a gentle rhythm of words that filled the space between them. Occasionally, he would glance up to see Thunder's reaction. The horse remained wary, but his frantic movements gradually subsided, replaced by attentive stillness. When Joey's voice finally grew tired, he closed the book and simply sat quietly. Then, speaking as if to a friend, he said, "My mom used to say, horses don't understand our words, but they perfectly understand our intentions. I'll come back tomorrow, Thunder." As he rose to leave, something remarkable happened. Thunder, who had maintained maximum distance throughout the visit, took one hesitant step toward the front of the stall. Then, in a gesture that made Joey's heart skip, the horse lowered his head slightly, not in submission, but in what appeared to be acknowledgement. From the entrance, Miguel had been watching silently. His weathered face registered something between amazement and reverence. "Dios mío," the caretaker murmured. "He recognized you." "Dios mío, he recognized you." Miguel's words hung in the air like morning mist as Joey stared at Thunder, hardly believing what he'd just witnessed. The lowered head, that single step forward, small gestures that seemed monumental given the horse's history of aggression. Joey felt something shift inside him, a quiet certainty taking root. "I'll be back tomorrow," he promised again, this time looking directly into Thunder's wary eyes. As dawn broke the following morning, Thunder stood alert at the front of his stall, ears pricked forward at the sound of approaching footsteps. When Joey appeared, the horse didn't retreat to the back corner as he had before. He remained at the front, watching intently as the boy settled into his now familiar spot several feet from the stall. "Good morning," Joey said softly, noticing the change. "You were waiting for me." For 3 hours before his shift at Dalton's Market, Joey simply sat reading aloud, his voice gentle and unhurried. Thunder listened, occasionally pawing at the ground but never retreating to his defensive position in the back corner. It was progress so subtle most would have missed it, but Joey understood its significance. This pattern continued for days. Joey would arrive before dawn, spend time with Thunder, then race to his shift at the market where he hauled crates and stacked produce with his thin, increasingly muscular arms. Afternoons were spent at the hospital with Grandma Betty, whose condition had deteriorated enough to require inpatient care. "The nurse said you haven't been to school in weeks," Betty said during one visit, her voice weak but her eyes sharp as ever. She reached for Joey's hand with fingers made skeletal by illness. "I've worked something out with Mr. Roberts," Joey assured her, mentioning his principal. "I'm submitting assignments online when I can." Betty's paper-thin skin crinkled as she frowned. "Your education is still happening," Joey finished for her, "just differently." He didn't mention Thunder. His grandmother had enough worries without adding his early morning trespassing to the list. "Tell me a story about Mom," Joey requested, changing the subject. "About her work with horses." Betty's face softened. "Your mother had a gift. She'd say, 'Horses don't understand words, but they comprehend intentions perfectly.' She never rushed them. People thought she was wasting time, just sitting near a troubled horse for days, but she was establishing trust." Joey leaned forward. "Did her methods work?" "Every time," Betty nodded. "But the racing world wants quick results. They couldn't understand that horses live in the present. They don't hold grudges like people, but they never forget who hurt them. Claire would say that Thunder—" She stopped, realizing her slip. "Thunder?" Joey repeated, surprised. Betty sighed. "I heard you talking in your sleep. I'm old, Joey, not stupid." Her thin hand squeezed his. "You're visiting that traumatized stallion at Darby Farms, aren't you?" Joey nodded, feeling caught but also relieved. "He needs someone, Grandma. Someone who doesn't want anything from him." Betty studied him for a long moment. "You're so like your mother. Just remember, Thunder needs to learn that you represent safety, not threat. That takes time, not force." The next morning, Joey arrived at the isolation barn with renewed purpose. As he settled into his usual spot, he spoke quietly to Thunder. "My grandmother says you need to learn I'm safe." He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small red apple. "I thought maybe we could start with this." Joey placed the apple on the ground halfway between himself and the stall, then returned to his position and began reading as usual. Thunder eyed the apple suspiciously, nostrils flaring to catch its scent. Though the horse didn't approach it that day, Joey noticed him watching it intently between glances at the boy. The following morning, Joey placed the apple slightly closer to Thunder's stall. The morning after that, closer still. Each day, the apple's position created a visible path of trust between them. On the 7th day, when Joey placed the apple just a foot from the stall bars, Thunder stretched his neck cautiously and, with lips velvet soft and precise, took the fruit. Joey felt his heart swell as he watched the powerful jaws work methodically, juice occasionally dribbling from the corners of Thunder's mouth. "Good boy," he whispered, fighting the urge to reach toward the bars. "We're getting there." A voice from behind him shattered the moment. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Joey turned to find a young woman watching him with arms crossed and eyebrows raised. She was perhaps 20, dressed in riding clothes that screamed privilege, but with an intensity in her gaze that reminded him uncomfortably of Richard Whitfield. "I'm just sitting with him," Joey answered, standing slowly to avoid startling Thunder, who had immediately backed away at the newcomer's arrival. "For what purpose?" she pressed. "And how did you get in here? This is private property." "Miguel, Mr. Sanchez, knows I'm here," Joey explained. "I've been coming for a couple weeks now. Thunder seems to be getting more comfortable." The young woman stepped closer, studying him. "You're Joey Miller, aren't you? The boy my father mentioned." Understanding dawned. "You're Sarah Whitfield." She nodded. "Veterinary student at UK, home for spring break." Her eyes moved from Joey to Thunder, who remained tense but hadn't retreated to his far corner. "What you're doing doesn't have any scientific basis. The protocols for recovery in traumatized horses require systematic desensitization and operant conditioning." Joey shrugged. "I don't know those terms, but I know that Thunder chooses to come a little closer each day. I'm not training him. We're getting to know each other." Sarah opened her mouth as if to argue, then closed it, her expression shifting to one of reluctant curiosity. "Show me." Over the next hour, Joey demonstrated his approach, or rather his deliberate lack of approach. He sat, read aloud, occasionally spoke directly to Thunder in conversational tones, all while maintaining a respectful distance. "This is completely unorthodox," Sarah commented, though her tone had lost its edge. "But he is calmer than reports indicated. The last veterinarian who tried to examine him nearly lost an eye." "He's not calm with everyone," Joey explained. "Just with me, and only when I don't push him." Sarah studied him thoughtfully. "I'd like to document this, for research purposes." Joey hesitated. "Your father wouldn't approve." "My father," Sarah said with a tightness around her mouth, "doesn't approve of most of my research interests. But I'm not asking his permission, and neither should you." The next morning, Joey arrived to find a small camera discreetly attached to the rafters above Thunder's stall. "Hope you don't mind," Sarah said, emerging from the shadows. "I'll be observing remotely most days. Don't worry, my father never comes to the isolation barn except when there's a problem. He considers it beneath his attention now that Thunder's defective." With Sarah documenting his interactions, Joey continued his gentle approach. Thunder now accepted apples directly from his hand through the bars and allowed Joey to speak to him from just inches away. The horse's eyes, once constantly rolling with fear, now held steady when they met Joey's gaze. "His cortisol levels must be dropping significantly," Sarah noted one afternoon, reviewing footage on her tablet. "His posture is completely different from when you started." Joey nodded. "He trusts me now. Not completely, but it's growing." "The question is whether he'll transfer that trust to anyone else," Sarah mused. "Or if this is just a one-person breakthrough." "One step at a time," Joey replied, echoing his grandmother's frequent advice. The peaceful progress shattered 2 days later when Richard Whitfield's voice boomed across the isolation barn. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded, striding toward them with thunder in his expression. "Sarah, explain yourself. And why is this boy back on my property?" Thunder immediately reacted to the aggressive tone, rearing back against the far wall of his stall with a terrified whinny. Joey instinctively moved closer to the bars, speaking in low, soothing tones, but the damage was done. Weeks of gradual trust building evaporated in seconds. "Dad, please lower your voice," Sarah urged. "You're frightening him." "Frightening him?" Whitfield scoffed. "That animal nearly killed 3 of my handlers. I think a raised voice is the least of his problems." Joey kept his focus on Thunder. "Please, Mr. Whitfield," he said quietly. "He's scared of shouting." "He's scared?" Whitfield's voice dripped with sarcasm. "It's a half-ton animal that nearly killed 3 grown men." He turned to his daughter. "I expected better judgment from you, Sarah. This boy has no qualifications, no understanding of the investment at stake." "That's precisely why his approach is working," Sarah countered. "He's not treating Thunder like an investment with a deadline." Whitfield's face reddened. "Everything in this operation has a deadline. I've been more than generous allowing this animal time to recover." He pointed at Joey without looking at him. "You have 1 week to show concrete results, boy. I want to see you riding that horse, or this experiment ends and he goes to the processor." "Dad," Sarah protested, "you can't just—" "It's my horse, my farm, my rules." Whitfield cut her off. 1 week, then I'm cutting my losses." After Whitfield stormed out, Thunder remained agitated, refusing to approach the front of the stall despite Joey's gentle coaxing. The horse paced nervously, tossing his head at every small sound. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, looking genuinely distressed. My father can be uncompromising. Joey didn't take his eyes off Thunder. It's not your fault, but we've lost ground. He's back to where we started. Not quite, a voice said from the doorway. Miguel stood there with two other stable hands, Pedro and Javier. He is afraid, yes, but he remembers you. We all saw the progress. Miguel approached, keeping a respectful distance from Thunder's stall. We will help you, muchacho. We will create a warning system when the boss is coming. Joey looked at the three men in surprise. You'd do that? You could lose your jobs. Pedro, a stocky man with calloused hands, shrugged. We've watched you every day. What you do with this horse. It reminds us how it should be, not how it is here. We will reorganize our schedules, Javier added. Someone will always watch the main entrance, ready to alert you if Mr. Whitfield appears. Sarah nodded decisively. I'll help too. I can provide official cover when needed. This is too important to abandon now. Joey felt a lump form in his throat at their unexpected support. Thank you, he managed. All of you. As the others left to return to their duties, Joey settled back into his spot near Thunder's stall. The horse still wouldn't approach, but Joey noticed he watched him intently from the back corner. It's just us again, Joey said softly. We'll start over if we need to. I'm not going anywhere. 3 days later, Joey arrived at the barn soaked to the skin. A sudden spring storm had caught him on his 5-mile walk, and the temperature had dropped unexpectedly. Shivering, he set down his backpack and wrapped his arms around himself, trying to stop his teeth from chattering. The stress of Whitfield's ultimatum, combined with news that his grandmother's latest treatment wasn't working as hoped, overwhelmed him. Before he could stop it, a single sob escaped his throat. Thunder, who had been gradually returning to his previous comfort level, suddenly approached the front of the stall. Joey looked up, expecting the horse to retreat at his emotional state. Instead, Thunder extended his muzzle through the bars and, with gentleness astonishing for such a powerful animal, lightly touched Joey's shoulder. From her hidden camera in the rafters, Sarah captured the moment, the voluntary touch that no handler, veterinarian or specialist had managed to elicit since Thunder's accident. The horse that attacked any human who approached had chosen to comfort a boy in distress. Thunder's muzzle rested gently against Joey's shoulder, the warm breath from his nostrils creating a small spot of heat on the boy's rain-soaked shirt. For a moment, time seemed suspended in the dim light of the isolation barn. Neither moved, the massive, frightened animal and the shivering, overwhelmed boy frozen in a tableau of unexpected connection. Joey held his breath, afraid the slightest movement might shatter this miraculous moment. Thunder's eyes, usually darting with anxiety, remained steady on Joey's face. In their dark depths, Joey saw something he recognized. Not just fear, but a profound loneliness that mirrored his own. "Thank you," Joey whispered finally, his voice barely audible. Thunder's ears flicked forward at the sound, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he extended his muzzle further, sniffing curiously at Joey's wet hair. From her hidden position in the rafters, Sarah stared at her camera's screen in disbelief. She'd been recording continuously since Joey arrived, hoping to document small, incremental progress. Instead, she'd captured something that defied all her textbook understanding of traumatized equine behavior. "Miguel," she whispered urgently into her phone. "You need to see this. Now." 20 minutes later, Sarah and Miguel huddled over her laptop in the feed room, watching the footage in stunned silence. The stable manager crossed himself when he saw Thunder initiate contact. "It's extraordinary," Sarah murmured, like he sensed Joey was suffering. "Perhaps he did," Miguel replied thoughtfully. "We say in Mexico that horses see the soul, not appearances." He tapped the screen where Joey and Thunder remained connected. This boy and this horse recognized the pain in each other. The footage continued, showing Joey gradually lifting his hand, moving with exquisite slowness until his fingers made the briefest contact with Thunder's muzzle. The horse flinched but didn't retreat, allowing the boy's fingertips to brush against his scarred skin for 3 heartbeats before pulling back, not in fear, but in caution. Progress measured in seconds, yet monumental in significance. I've been around horses my entire life, Sarah said, and I've never seen anything like this. A horse with Thunder's trauma history shouldn't be capable of this level of trust after such a short intervention period. Miguel's weathered face creased into a knowing smile. Your veterinary books can teach many things, señorita, but some knowledge lives in the heart, not the mind. The following morning, Joey arrived at the hospital carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers he'd gathered from the fields bordering Darby Farms. Betty's hospital room, stark and antiseptic, brightened fractionally as he arranged them in a plastic cup by her bed. "You look different today," Betty observed, her keen eyes missing nothing despite her weakened state. "Something's happened." Joey sat beside her, taking her thin hand in his. "Thunder let me touch him yesterday, just for a moment, but he initiated it." Betty's face softened. "Tell me everything." As Joey recounted the breakthrough, Betty nodded, unsurprised. "Your mother would say that's when the real connection begins, when the horse chooses you." She squeezed his hand with what little strength she had left. "Trust comes before obedience, Joey. Always. Your mother understood that when others couldn't." Joey leaned forward. "I wish I remembered more about her methods." "You don't need to remember," Betty said. "You've inherited her instincts. You're doing exactly what she would have done." Later that afternoon, Joey returned to Thunder with renewed purpose. The horse now approached the front of his stall whenever Joey appeared, ears forward, eyes watchful but no longer panicked. "I brought something special today," Joey said, pulling a soft bristled brush from his backpack. "My grandma says grooming builds trust. May I try?" He extended the brush slowly through the bars. Thunder stretched his neck, nostrils flaring as he investigated this new object. After a careful assessment, the stallion moved closer, allowing the brush to make contact with his neck. Joey began with gentle, short strokes, watching Thunder's reactions closely. The horse's muscles twitched initially, but soon began to relax under the rhythmic grooming. For 15 minutes, Joey worked quietly, brushing what areas he could reach through the bars, all while maintaining a soft, one-sided conversation. "My mom used to say that horses understand tone better than words," Joey murmured. She could calm the most nervous horse just by talking about ordinary things in the right voice. Thunder's eyelids drooped slightly, his lower lip loosening, signs of relaxation that would have seemed impossible weeks earlier. From her observation point, Sarah documented every interaction meticulously, beginning to structure her notes as a formal case study. What had begun as curious observation was evolving into something potentially groundbreaking from a veterinary perspective. "Subject demonstrates sustained reduction in stress responses," she dictated quietly into her recorder. "Accepts touch on previously defensive areas. Voluntary approach behavior increasing daily. Traditional rehabilitation timeframes appear inapplicable to the Miller method." She smiled at her impromptu naming of Joey's approach. Her professors would require more rigorous documentation and control conditions, but Sarah increasingly believed they were witnessing something significant, not just for Thunder, but potentially for traumatized horses everywhere. During their next hospital visit, Joey found his grandmother noticeably weaker. The aggressive cancer treatment was taking its toll, and new concerns about her heart had emerged. As they discussed the expensive experimental treatment her doctors had recommended, worry settled heavily in Joey's chest. "Don't look so frightened," Betty said, patting his hand. "I've lived a full life, Joey." "You're going to live a lot more of it," Joey insisted, though the tremor in his voice betrayed his uncertainty. That evening, Joey sat on the floor near Thunder's stall, the weight of his concerns visibly pressing on his thin shoulders. "They want to try a new treatment for Grandma," he confided to the horse as if speaking to an old friend, "but insurance won't cover it, and we'd need to pay up front." Thunder listened attentively, occasionally nickering softly as if encouraging Joey to continue. "She's all I have," Joey whispered, his voice breaking. "I can't lose her too." Thunder moved closer to the bars, lowering his head to Joey's eye level. a gesture of remarkable empathy from an animal once considered dangerous to approach. The next morning, Miguel quietly opened the stall door while Thunder was eating. Joey stood nervously at the threshold, heart pounding. "Are you sure about this?" Miguel asked, hand resting cautiously on the latch. "He has been calmer, yes, but entering his space is different." Joey nodded. "He's ready. I can feel it." 10 seconds, Miguel warned. "If anything seems wrong, I pull you out immediately." Joey stepped slowly into the stall, keeping his movements deliberate and his voice steady. "Hey, Thunder, it's just me." The horse turned from his hay, ears pricked forward in surprise at finding Joey inside his sanctuary. For 3 breathless seconds, Thunder froze, assessing this unprecedented development. Miguel tensed, ready to intervene, but Joey raised a hand slightly, silently asking for patience. "Confianza no puede ser forzada," Joey said softly, repeating a phrase Miguel had taught him. "Trust cannot be forced." Thunder took one careful step toward Joey, then another, his nostrils flaring as he caught the boy's familiar scent. When he was close enough to touch, the stallion paused, seeming to invite contact on his own terms. With exquisite gentleness, Joey raised his hand and placed it against Thunder's powerful chest, feeling the strong heartbeat beneath his palm. The horse remained steady, accepting the touch without fear. "Good boy," Joey whispered, emotion thickening his voice. "I knew you could do it." Gradually, Joey moved his hand up Thunder's neck, over his shoulder, and finally to the scars on his face, marks that no one had been allowed to examine or treat properly since the accident. Thunder flinched slightly but permitted the contact, his eyes half closed in what appeared to be relief. Unknown to Joey and Miguel, Sarah was filming from her hidden camera, capturing every moment of this extraordinary breakthrough. She watched, transfixed, as the boy methodically checked each of Thunder's healing wounds, speaking reassuringly throughout the examination. "The scarring is significant," Joey observed aloud, gently tracing a particularly deep mark on Thunder's flank. "But with proper care, they'll fade." "What is going on here?" Richard Whitfield's voice sliced through the quiet moment like a whip crack. He stood at the entrance to the isolation barn, his face a mask of disbelief as he took in the impossible scene. Joey Miller, the trailer park boy, standing inside Thunder's stall, his hand resting casually on the horse that had attacked every handler who'd attempted to approach him since the accident. Thunder tensed immediately, but instead of retreating or attacking as he once would have, he moved closer to Joey, as if seeking protection. Whitfield's expression transformed from shock to calculation, his businessman's mind quickly reassessing Thunder's potential value now that rehabilitation seemed possible. He stepped forward, his tone abruptly cordial. "Impressive boy," he said, masking his surprise with condescension. "I didn't actually expect you'd get this far." Joey kept his hand on Thunder's neck, feeling the tension vibrating through the powerful animal. "He just needed someone to understand him," he said simply. Whitfield scoffed. "Understanding doesn't win races or stud fees." His eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "But I recognize talent when I see it. How would you like a real job? $15 an hour as a junior handler. You'd work directly with Thunder until he's ready to resume training." Joey felt Thunder shift nervously beside him, reacting to Whitfield's predatory energy. "I'm not here for a job, Mr. Whitfield," he answered carefully. "I promised Thunder that no one would hurt him again, and pushing him back into training too soon would break that promise. Making carrot sticks won't pay your grandmother's medical bills," Whitfield observed shrewdly, his words hitting their target with precision. $15 an hour, 40 hours a week. That's real money for someone in your situation. All you need to do is get this horse ready for professional training by the end of the month." Joey stroked Thunder's neck, feeling the animal's rapid pulse beneath his fingers. "He's not ready for that." "Then make him ready," Whitfield pressed. "But I need to see you riding him by the end of the week. A horse needs to be ridden to have value in this business." Sarah stepped forward from the shadows where she'd been watching. "Dad, what Joey has accomplished is extraordinary from a veterinary perspective. Horses with severe psychological trauma rarely recover this quickly." We need to give him more time. Time is money, darling, Whitfield replied dismissively. And this boy is spending mine. He turned back to Joey. End of the week. I want to see you on that horse, or our arrangement ends. That was our deal. Thunder shifted uneasily, picking up on the rising tension. Joey kept his voice deliberately calm, focusing on soothing the nervous animal while responding to Whitfield. A horse's timeline isn't the same as ours, he said, echoing his grandmother's wisdom. Thunder will let me know when he's ready to be ridden. Whitfield's smile didn't reach his eyes. That's not how this business works, boy. I decide the timeline for animals on my property. He checked his watch impatiently. End of the week. Ride the horse or say goodbye to him. Your choice. As Whitfield turned to leave, he added over his shoulder, And Sarah, I expect those cameras removed immediately. This isn't your school project. It's my investment. When Whitfield's footsteps faded, Joey exhaled shakily, realizing he'd been holding his breath. Thunder nuzzled his shoulder gently, as if offering comfort. Promise to a horse? Whitfield's scornful voice drifted back as he paused at the barn door, his tone rising dangerously. You forget, boy, that this animal is my property. I have papers that prove it, and I don't need your permission to decide what happens on my farm. You forget, boy, that this animal is my property. I have papers that prove it, and I don't need your permission to decide what happens on my farm. Richard Whitfield's words hung in the air like a gathering storm as he strode away, leaving Joey standing motionless in Thunder's stall. The horse had gone rigid at Whitfield's aggressive tone, his muscles quivering beneath Joey's steadying hand. Even after the barn door slammed shut, Thunder remained tense, his large dark eyes fixed on the entrance as if expecting further threats. Joey understood immediately. Thunder's body wasn't just responding to a loud voice or sudden movement. The horse was reacting to the underlying hostility in Whitfield's manner, the same domineering energy that had likely characterized the training session that broke him. It's okay, Joey murmured, keeping his voice deliberately soft. He's gone now. Thunder's ears flicked back and forth, uncertainty clear in his posture. He shifted his weight, the confined space of the stall suddenly feeling dangerous again. A shudder ran through his powerful frame, and Joey recognized the precursors to panic. Moving slowly, Joey began to hum, not a recognizable tune, just a gentle rhythmic sound that filled the space between them. The vibration in his chest seemed to reach Thunder in a way words couldn't. Gradually, the horse's breathing slowed, his ears relaxing from their pinned-back position. That's it, Joey encouraged. Just you and me here. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her face tight with anger. I'm sorry about my father, she said quietly, careful not to startle Thunder. He sees everything, everyone, as assets to be managed. Joey nodded, continuing to stroke Thunder's neck in long, steady motions. Thunder knows the difference. He can feel when someone sees him as a thing versus a being. Thunder snorted softly as if agreeing. Sarah watched them for a moment. The ultimatum is problematic. Thunder isn't ready to be ridden, and forcing the issue could undo everything you've accomplished. I won't force him, Joey said firmly, no matter what your father threatens. Miguel entered behind Sarah, his expression grave. Mr. Whitfield's threat is not empty, muchacho. I have seen it before. Horses that don't perform as expected, shipped to Canada. He didn't need to elaborate further. They all understood the implication. Thunder sensed the heightened emotion, his ears swiveling nervously. Joey continued his gentle stroking, trying to project calm he didn't feel. We need to buy more time, Sarah said decisively. Dad rarely visits the isolation barn. If we work together, we can keep your sessions with Thunder going while figuring out a long-term solution. Miguel nodded. The morning shift will watch the main entrance. Pedro, Javier, Luis, they will all help. We have radios to warn if El Patron approaches. Joey felt a lump form in his throat at their unexpected alliance. Thank you. But why risk your jobs for us? Miguel's weathered face softened. "This boy has shown us more than a way to calm a horse," he explained to Sarah. "He has shown us that gentleness is not weakness. Some of us have forgotten this, working too long in places where animals are just machines for making money." The following morning, Joey arrived at the barn to find a small network already in place. Javier was stationed by the main house with a radio, while Luis had reorganized the feeding schedule to give him a reason to be near the isolation barn. Pedro had crafted a simple rope alarm system that would rattle a bucket if anyone approached from the main path. "The Underground Railroad for barn boys," Sarah joked as she showed Joey the discreet safety measures. For the next 3 days, Joey worked steadily with Thunder, building on their breakthrough. The horse now allowed him full access to his stall, accepting grooming and examination without the previous fear. Joey was careful not to rush, spending hours simply being present, sometimes reading aloud, other times singing softly while cleaning Thunder's scarred flanks. Word about the boy and the untouchable horse began to spread beyond Darby Farms. Miguel's cousin, who worked at Oak Ridge Feed Store, mentioned it to a regular customer. A groom from a neighboring farm heard the story while buying supplies. Soon, people began finding excuses to drive slowly past the isolation barn, hoping for a glimpse of the unlikely pair. One afternoon, Dr. Eleanor Jenkins, a retired veterinarian who had once been a formidable presence in the local racing scene, appeared at the barn door. Tall and silver-haired, with penetrating eyes that missed nothing, she surveyed the scene before her. Joey sitting cross-legged on the stall floor, Thunder standing relaxed beside him, head lowered in contentment. "So it's true," she said, her voice carrying the refined accent of old Kentucky money. "The Miller boy has done what Whitfield's expensive trainers couldn't." Joey scrambled to his feet, suddenly aware he was trespassing. "Dr. Jenkins, I'm sorry if—" She waved away his apology. "Richard Whitfield and I have been rivals since he was a failed jockey with delusions of grandeur. Nothing would please me more than seeing him proven wrong." She approached carefully, maintaining a respectful distance from Thunder. "May I observe?" For the next hour, Dr. Jenkins watched silently as Joey worked with Thunder, guiding the horse through simple liberty exercises, moving forward, stopping, turning, all without physical contact, using only body language and soft verbal cues. "What I'm seeing, Doctor," Jenkins finally said, "is an approach that defies everything the industry practices. This boy is applying instinctively principles of trauma recovery that we're only beginning to understand in advanced veterinary medicine." Sarah, who had been filming the session, looked up with interest. "Do you think there's research potential here?" "More than potential," Dr. Jenkins confirmed. "There's a revolution waiting to happen in how we understand equine psychology and trauma." Meanwhile, at Oak Ridge Regional Hospital, Betty Miller's condition worsened. New tests revealed the cancer had spread to her lymphatic system, and her doctors recommended an experimental immunotherapy treatment not covered by her basic insurance. "The treatment costs $80,000, the oncologist explained gently. "Without insurance approval, we require payment before we can begin." Joey sat beside his grandmother's bed, trying to process the impossible figure. His earnings from stocking shelves at Dalton's Market barely covered their existing medical bills. 80,000 might as well be 80 million. "Don't look so worried, Joey," Betty said, her once strong voice now barely above a whisper. "I've had a good run." "This isn't the end of your run," Joey insisted, fighting back tears. "I'll figure something out." That evening, as Joey approached Thunder's stall, the horse immediately sensed his distress. Instead of their usual greeting, Thunder stood alert, eyes fixed intently on Joey's face, nostrils flaring, as if trying to scent the source of the boy's pain. "My grandma's getting worse," Joey confessed, sliding down against the stall wall. "The treatment that might help costs more money than I'll see in years." Thunder lowered his head, gently nuzzling Joey's hair. The gesture, so full of compassion, broke something inside the boy. He buried his face against the horse's neck and let the tears come. The next morning, Joey found Richard Whitfield waiting for him outside the isolation barn. The businessman's sleek car gleamed in the early light, its engine still ticking as it cooled. "Walk with me, Miller," Whitfield commanded, not waiting for a response before striding toward a private training ring nearby. Joey followed warily, glancing back at Thunder's barn. "I need to see Thunder first. This is about Thunder," Whitfield cut him off. Once they were out of earshot of the stable hands, he turned to face Joey. "I've been thinking about your unique approach with my horse." The possessive phrasing wasn't lost on Joey. "Yes, sir?" Whitfield reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. $50,000 for the complete transfer of rights to the method you used with Thunder. By signing this contract, you agree not to visit the horse anymore and allow my trainers to take over from here. Joey stared at the document, the sum making his head swim. 50,000, enough to cover most of his grandmother's treatment, enough to give her a fighting chance. "I've heard about your grandmother's situation," Whitfield continued, his voice a practiced blend of sympathy and authority. "This could solve your immediate problems. It's a generous offer for an unproven technique from an untrained boy." Joey's hands trembled slightly as he accepted the contract. The dense legal text swam before his eyes, but certain phrases stood out starkly. Exclusive rights, proprietary methods, non-compete clause, and finally, no further contact with the subject animal. "What will you do with Thunder afterward?" Joey asked, his mouth suddenly dry. Whitfield's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Business is business, boy. If he can be rehabilitated for racing, excellent. If not, there's still the breeding market or—" He left the sentence unfinished, the implication hanging heavily between them. Looking up from the contract, Joey saw Thunder through the open barn door, watching their interaction intently. In that moment, clarity washed over him. Thunder wasn't a problem to be solved, or a commodity to be traded. He was a being who had chosen to trust after profound betrayal. "Thunder isn't a machine that can be operated by anyone who reads the manual," Joey said, returning the unsigned contract. "He trusts me because he knows I don't see him as a product." Whitfield's face hardened, the mask of benevolence slipping to reveal cold fury. "You're making a serious mistake, boy. That horse belongs to me legally, and your sentimental attachment doesn't change that fact." "No, it doesn't," Joey agreed quietly. "But it does change how I choose to act." Within hours, Whitfield's retribution was swift and comprehensive. Guards were posted at all entrances to Darby Farms with specific instructions to bar Joey Miller from the property. Thunder was relocated to a more isolated stall in the farthest corner of the estate, away from prying eyes. Miguel found Joey waiting anxiously at their usual meeting spot outside the property line. "I'm sorry, muchacho. There are guards everywhere. Mr. Whitfield has told everyone you are banned." Joey's heart sank. "How's Thunder?" Miguel's expression darkened. "Not good. They moved him to the old storage barn. He attacked the handlers who tried to lead him. They had to sedate him." He hesitated before adding, "He keeps looking for you, I think. Watching the door whenever it opens." The news spread quickly through Oak Ridge's close-knit equestrian community. Dr. Jenkins, outraged by Whitfield's actions, contacted local journalists about the promising rehabilitation that had been arbitrarily terminated. When reporters arrived at Darby Farms, they were turned away by security, which only increased speculation about what Whitfield might be hiding. Meanwhile, Sarah continued documenting everything, including Thunder's rapid regression after separation from Joey. The once improving horse had reverted completely, refusing food and becoming dangerously aggressive again. She shared her findings with professors at the veterinary school, who expressed serious concern about the ethical implications of interrupting a successful rehabilitation protocol. Joey felt helpless, haunted by thoughts of Thunder waiting for him, not understanding his absence. Each day he walked the perimeter of Darby Farms, hoping for even a glimpse of the black stallion. But the sprawling property kept its secrets well hidden behind manicured hedges and security patrols. The situation reached a breaking point when, during a routine inspection by the Kentucky Animal Protection Association following anonymous complaints, investigators discovered concerning irregularities in Darby Farms' training records. Documents revealed that Thunder's accident wasn't an isolated incident. Several horses had suffered injuries from excessive restraint methods, carefully concealed from official reports. As the investigators dug deeper, Richard Whitfield realized his carefully constructed image was beginning to crumble. Whispers of improper practices reached the Kentucky Horse Park Board, where Whitfield had long enjoyed prestigious membership. Subtle inquiries about his continued participation in upcoming events suggested his influence was waning. When a surprise inspection arrived at Darby Farms from the Kentucky Animal Protection Association due to anonymous denunciations, Whitfield suspected his own daughter might be behind the accusations that threatened to unravel his empire. The Kentucky Animal Protection Association's surprise inspection sent ripples of unease through Darby Farms. Richard Whitfield paced in his office, glaring at the manila folder an inspector had left, a formal notice of investigation based on anonymous reports. His suspicion landed immediately on Sarah. Who else had both insider knowledge and the motivation to betray him? Whitfield slammed his palm against his mahogany desk. "Lawrence!" he barked, and his assistant appeared instantly at the doorway. "Get me everything on these so-called irregularities they're investigating, and find Sarah, now." While Whitfield scrambled to contain the damage, inspectors methodically worked through the property, examining records and interviewing stable hands. Miguel Sanchez answered their questions with careful neutrality, neither lying nor volunteering information that might jeopardize his position. Yet his eyes followed the inspectors whenever they approached the records room, knowing what they might find there. "The accident reports seem incomplete," noted a sharp-eyed inspector, comparing documents. "3 incidents in the last quarter, but only one has complete veterinary documentation." The lead inspector, a woman who'd spent 20 years investigating animal welfare cases, paused at Thunder's empty stall in the isolation barn. "And this is where the horse in question was kept, before being moved?" "Si, señora," Miguel confirmed. "Thunder was here until 3 days ago." "And why was he moved so suddenly?" she asked, making a note on her clipboard. Miguel hesitated, weighing his 20 years of employment against his conscience. "You would have to ask Mr. Whitfield," he finally answered, his eyes dropping to the floor. Across town, Joey sat beside his grandmother's hospital bed, helplessly watching her labored breathing. The experimental treatment remained tantalizingly out of reach, locked behind an impossible financial barrier. His thoughts kept returning to Thunder, imagining the horse confused and alone, perhaps believing Joey had abandoned him like everyone else. "You're thinking about him again," Betty observed weakly, her intuition undiminished by illness. Joey nodded, unable to hide his distress. "They won't let me near him. Mr. Whitfield has guards posted everywhere." Betty's paper-thin hand found his. "When doors close, sometimes windows open. Your mother used to say that." A soft knock at the hospital room door interrupted them. "Doctor." Eleanor Jenkins stood in the doorway, her commanding presence somehow softened by genuine concern. "Mrs. Miller." She greeted Betty with respectful warmth before turning to Joey. "Young man, we need to talk about what's happening at Darby Farms." Dr. Jenkins settled into the visitor's chair, her back straight as a riding crop despite her 70 years. "The inspection today is just the beginning. Whitfield's methods have been questionable for years, but he's always managed to charm or intimidate his way out of consequences." She fixed Joey with a penetrating gaze. "What you accomplished with Thunder threatens his entire approach to training. It suggests there's a better way, a way that doesn't treat horses as disposable commodities." "But I can't even see Thunder now," Joey said, frustration evident in his voice. "Perhaps not directly," Dr. Jenkins conceded, "but what you started has taken on a life of its own." She pulled out her phone, showing Joey a social media post about the miracle horse whisperer of Oak Ridge that had been shared hundreds of times. People are asking questions. Local trainers are wondering why Whitfield won't allow independent verification of Thunder's condition. Joey's heart raced with renewed hope. "Do you think there's a way to help him?" "I think," Dr. Jenkins said carefully, "that Richard Whitfield cares about one thing above all else: his reputation in the racing community. Public pressure might be your strongest leverage." At Darby Farms, Sarah sat stiffly across from her father in his office, refusing to flinch under his accusatory glare. "Was it you?" Whitfield demanded. Did you report us to the authorities? Sarah met his gaze steadily. If I had concrete evidence of abuse, I would have a professional obligation to report it. As a student veterinarian, animal welfare comes first. Before family loyalty? Whitfield's voice rose dangerously. Family loyalty shouldn't require ethical compromise, Sarah countered, her voice remaining level despite her racing heart. Whitfield studied his daughter's face, searching for signs of deception. Finding none, he switched tactics. Thunder has regressed completely. He's refusing food, attacking handlers. The Miller boy's intervention has ultimately made him worse. Sarah fought to keep her expression neutral, though inwardly she recoiled at the manipulation. That's not a fair assessment. The regression began immediately after you separated them, which suggests nothing. Whitfield interrupted sharply. It proves the horse is unstable and the boy's methods are unsustainable. He leaned back in his chair, voice softening. Sarah, I know you're interested in alternative training approaches. That's fine for academic exploration, but this is a business, not a research facility. Sarah stood, gathering her dignity around her like armor. Perhaps it should be both, Dad. The most successful operations in modern equine sports are those that innovate based on research, not tradition alone. As she left her father's office, Sarah made a decision. The partial documentation she'd been collecting needed to become something more comprehensive, more public. She spent the evening compiling all her footage of Joey and Thunder, organizing it chronologically to show the clear progression and subsequent regression. The next morning, she contacted her faculty advisor at the veterinary school, Dr. Matthews, sending him selected clips with a carefully worded email. Evidence of successful trauma recovery interrupted by non-scientific management decision, requesting urgent ethical consultation. Dr. Matthews's response came within hours. This is remarkable footage. The interrupted protocol raises serious ethical concerns. Can you bring all documentation to my office tomorrow? The academic interest in Thunder's case added a new dimension to the growing controversy. What had begun as a personal connection between a boy and a traumatized horse was evolving into a potential case study with implications for equine rehabilitation practices industry-wide. Meanwhile, Joey continued his daily ritual of walking Derby Farm's perimeter, hoping for any glimpse of Thunder. On the fifth day, his persistence was rewarded when Miguel briefly appeared at a service gate, slipping him a folded note before disappearing back inside. Joey unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. Thunder refuses food from everyone, growing weaker. Sarah has plan. Meet at Dr. Jenkins's house tonight, 8 o'clock. That evening, a small but determined group gathered in Dr. Jenkins's living room. Joey, Sarah, Miguel, who had risked his job to attend, and 2 professors from the veterinary school. The conversation quickly centered on Thunder's deteriorating condition and the strategic response needed. We need to make this bigger than one horse, Dr. Matthews explained. If we frame it as Whitfield versus a poor boy, he'll crush the story with legal threats. But if we present it as a scientific case study being recklessly interrupted, with documented evidence of regression, the academic and animal welfare communities will take notice, Sarah finished. Dad cares about his standing with major donors and racing organizations. That's his vulnerable point. Dr. Jenkins nodded approvingly. I've already contacted several board members at Kentucky Horse Park. They're concerned about association with controversial training methods, especially with the Breeders' Cup approaching. Joey listened to their strategic discussion, appreciating their support but increasingly anxious about Thunder. How long can he go without eating properly? The room fell silent, the practical reality cutting through their planning. Miguel finally spoke up, his voice heavy with concern. 3 more days like this, and he will be too weak. Mr. Whitfield is already talking about humane options if the situation doesn't improve. The urgency of Thunder's condition galvanized them into immediate action. Sarah proposed an unauthorized press conference at the edge of Derby Farm's property the following afternoon. Dr. Matthews offered to bring colleagues to provide scientific credibility. Dr. Jenkins would leverage her connections to ensure attendance from key industry figures. What about me? Joey asked. What can I do? Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're the heart of this story, Joey. Your connection with thunder is what everyone needs to see." The next day, Sarah's unauthorized press conference took shape just beyond Darby Farms' property line. A hasty arrangement of folding chairs accommodated local reporters, veterinary experts, and curious community members. Sarah had set up a projector screen against the side of a rented van, where she prepared to show her carefully edited footage. Word of the gathering reached Richard Whitfield almost immediately. He watched from his office window, fury building as he recognized his daughter at the center of the activity. When his security team asked if they should disperse the crowd, he shook his head slowly. "No. Let's see what kind of spectacle my daughter has arranged. It might be educational." Sarah stepped forward as the small crowd settled, her voice steadier than her nerves. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I've called this informal briefing to share concerning developments regarding a rehabilitation case at Darby Farms, one that has implications far beyond a single horse." The screen behind her illuminated with the first image. Thunder in his isolated stall, eyes wild with fear, body tensed for flight or fight. This is Thunder 6 weeks ago, a valuable thoroughbred rendered unapproachable after a training accident. The footage progressed, showing Joey's patient, non-conventional approach, the gradual trust building, the first tentative touch, the remarkable moments of connection. Gasps rose from the audience as they witnessed Thunder's transformation under Joey's gentle persistence. "What you're seeing," Sarah explained, "is not mysticism or some innate horse-whispering gift. It's the application of trauma-informed care principles that the scientific community is only beginning to formally study in equines." Dr. Matthews stepped forward to add his professional assessment. "The approach documented here demonstrates remarkable alignment with emerging research on neurological responses to trauma in mammals. The subject horse shows classic signs of trust rebuilding through consistent, non-threatening presence." Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger with purpose. "My father built an empire based on exploitation of animals, workers, and the goodwill of this community. What Joey Miller showed is not just how to rehabilitate a traumatized horse, but how our entire industry has lost its way, prioritizing profit over welfare." From his window, Whitfield watched the presentation with mounting alarm as cameras captured every moment, phones live streaming to social media platforms. He grabbed his phone, barking orders to his PR team. "Damage control, now." By evening, the footage had gone viral across equestrian forums and animal welfare sites. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as David versus Goliath, the powerless boy who understood horses better than the powerful businessman who owned them. Whitfield's hastily arranged counter-press conference the following morning had the stilted quality of crisis management. Standing before Darby Farms' impressive main entrance, surrounded by anxious-looking executives, he read from a prepared statement. "I am announcing a complete review of training practices across all my properties," he stated rigidly. "Regarding the specific case of the horse Thunder, I acknowledge that alternative methods have demonstrated unexpected efficacy. I publicly invite Joey Miller to return to Darby Farms as a special consultant to implement his innovative program." It was a surrender disguised as generosity, motivated by desperation to save his reputation and investments. But for Joey, watching the broadcast on the small TV in his grandmother's hospital room, the only thing that mattered was the chance to reunite with Thunder. The crowd of reporters, photographers, and curious onlookers gathered at the main gates of Darby Farms grew with each passing minute. Joey stood among them, feeling strangely detached from the spectacle unfolding around him. While microphones captured Whitfield's carefully crafted apology and cameras flashed to document the moment, Joey's thoughts remained fixed on Thunder. Would the horse remember him? Or worse, would Thunder feel betrayed by his absence these past days? "Mr. Miller will now enter the property to reunite with Thunder," Whitfield announced, gesturing toward Joey with the practiced magnanimity of a monarch granting clemency. Sarah appeared at Joey's side, whispering urgently, "Dad's turned this into a publicity stunt. There are cameras everywhere. Thunder won't respond well to the crowd." Joey nodded, his expression grim. "I know." The iron gates swung open, and Whitfield's assistant ushered Joey forward. The walk to the isolation barn felt interminable, each step taken under the scrutiny of the assembled media. Whitfield strode beside him, maintaining a careful smile while providing commentary clearly meant for the cameras. "We're very optimistic about Thunder's rehabilitation program moving forward," he was saying. "Darby Farms has always been committed to innovative care methods." When they reached the old storage barn where Thunder had been relocated, Joey's heart sank. The structure was dark and utilitarian, lacking the proper ventilation and natural light of the main stables. 2 security guards flanked the entrance, and a cluster of cameras had already been set up inside. "Wait," Joey said, stopping abruptly. "There are too many people." Whitfield's PR director, a sharp-featured woman in an immaculate suit, frowned. "We need to document the reunion for our press package." Joey stood his ground. Thunder was traumatized by crowds and restraints. All these people and equipment will terrify him. "Impossible," the PR director countered. "This is a moment of relations publicity crucial for Darby Farms." Sarah stepped forward, her voice carrying unexpected authority. "If you want the miracle for your cameras, you need to respect the conditions that made this miracle possible initially." Whitfield hesitated, visibly calculating the potential costs and benefits before nodding curtly. "Everyone out except the primary camera operator. And you," he added, pointing to Sarah. "You can stay to supervise." When the barn had emptied of all but Sarah, operating a single discrete camera, and a reluctant Whitfield watching from the doorway, Joey finally approached Thunder's stall. What he saw made his stomach twist. The magnificent horse that had begun to carry himself with renewed dignity was gone. In his place stood a shadow. Head low, ribs beginning to show beneath his dull coat, eyes vacant and distrustful. At Joey's approach, Thunder immediately retreated to the farthest corner, his posture defensive and fearful. "What have they done to you?" Joey whispered, his voice breaking. Thunder's ears flattened, his entire body radiating distress. He didn't recognize Joey, or perhaps worse, he did recognize him but now associated him with abandonment and renewed pain. Joey sat down on the straw-covered floor, precisely as he had on their first meeting. "I'm sorry I disappeared," he said softly. "I promised I would be here and I broke that promise. I understand if your trust is broken too." From the doorway, Whitfield shifted impatiently. "This isn't very compelling footage," he muttered to Sarah. "How long is he going to just sit there?" Sarah silenced him with a look that carried years of accumulated resentment. "As long as it takes." For nearly 2 hours, Joey simply remained still, occasionally speaking in low, gentle tones to Thunder. He recounted ordinary events, his walk to the market that morning, the wildflowers blooming along the roadside, a blue jay that had followed him for half a mile. Nothing demanding, nothing expectant, just presence. Gradually, Thunder's posture began to soften. His ears, previously pinned back in distress, occasionally flicked forward to catch Joey's voice. Though he remained in his corner, the violent tension in his muscles slowly ebbed. "I think I should leave now," Joey finally said, speaking directly to Thunder. "I've been here too long today and I don't want to overwhelm you. But I'll come back tomorrow, I promise." He rose slowly, careful not to make sudden movements. "And this time, I'll keep that promise." Whitfield was apoplectic as they exited the barn. "That's it? 2 hours of sitting and talking for absolutely no results?" His face flushed with anger. This was supposed to be a triumphant reunion, not whatever that was. "That," Sarah said firmly, "was the beginning of rebuilding broken trust. Did you notice Thunder didn't retreat further when Joey stood up? That's progress." "Progress," Whitfield scoffed. "The media is expecting a miracle horse story, not watching paint dry." Joey turned to face Whitfield directly. "Thunder isn't performing for your cameras, Mr. Whitfield. He's trying to survive trauma. If you want your miracle, you'll need to respect his timeline, not yours." The following morning, Joey returned with quiet determination. This time, there were no cameras or reporters. Sarah had convinced her father that documenting every incremental step would only yield footage of apparent inaction, useless for publicity purposes. Joey carried a small red apple in his pocket, the symbol of their first connection. When he entered the stall area, Thunder watched him with wary attention, but didn't immediately retreat to his corner. "I brought something for you," Joey said, slowly withdrawing the apple from his pocket. He placed it carefully in the center of the stall, then retreated to his usual spot. Thunder's nostrils flared, catching the familiar scent. For long minutes, the horse remained frozen, visibly conflicted between desire and distrust. Joey waited patiently, making no demands. Finally, with painstaking caution, Thunder approached the apple, his eyes never leaving Joey as he stretched his neck to retrieve the fruit. Unlike their earlier sessions, Thunder immediately backed away after taking the apple, retreating to a safe distance to eat it. "That's okay," Joey assured him. "You get to decide how close we are." Over the next week, Joey visited Thunder each morning, always bringing an apple, always respecting the horse's boundaries. Sarah continued to document the process, but now with a different purpose. What had begun as evidence against her father was evolving into legitimate research material. "I've shown some of the footage to my professors," she told Joey one afternoon as they left the barn together. "They're fascinated by your approach. Dr. Levinson wants to include it in a study he's conducting on trauma response in horses." Joey looked surprised. "But I'm not doing anything scientific." "That's exactly what interests them," Sarah explained. "Your intuitive approach aligns with emerging research on mammalian trauma recovery. Dr. Levinson thinks your method could become a formal protocol." The academic interest in Thunder's case continued to grow. Sarah convinced her professors to witness Joey's work firsthand, arranging for Dr. Matthews and 2 other faculty members to observe a session. Their professional validation further legitimized what the stable hands had already recognized. Joey's gift wasn't mystical, but a profound form of empathy and respect that transcended conventional techniques. 3 weeks after their reunion, Thunder finally allowed Joey to touch him again. The moment came without fanfare. Joey sitting quietly as usual, Thunder gradually moving closer until, with deliberate intent, he lowered his head to Joey's outstretched hand. The contact was brief but momentous, acknowledged by both with a stillness that seemed to suspend time. "He remembers," Sarah whispered from her observation point, capturing the moment on camera. Word of Thunder's gradual recovery spread through the equestrian community. Dr. Peterson, a renowned equine behavior specialist from Cornell University, arrived unannounced one morning, requesting permission to observe Joey's work. "Mr. Whitfield invited me," he explained when Sarah expressed surprise. "He's quite eager to have professional assessment of the rehabilitation program." Dr. Peterson was a tall, lean man in his 60s with the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades outdoors. Unlike many specialists Joey had encountered, he asked few questions, preferring to observe in complete silence. For 3 consecutive days, he watched Joey and Thunder's interactions, taking meticulous notes and occasionally nodding to himself. On the 4th day, he requested a meeting with Whitfield, Sarah, and Joey in the main office. His assessment was unequivocal. "What we're seeing here," he declared after reviewing his notes, "is not just an isolated case of special connection, but potentially a new paradigm for working with traumatized horses." Joey instinctively applies principles that science has only begun to validate about how trauma affects the equine brain and how trust can be rebuilt through consistent, non-threatening presence. Whitfield leaned forward, suddenly interested. "You're saying his method could be replicated? Standardized?" "The principles could be," Dr. Peterson clarified, "though the execution requires something that can't be easily taught: genuine patience and absence of agenda. Most handlers are too focused on results within commercial time frames." The professional endorsement shifted something in Whitfield's approach. Where he had seen only a publicity opportunity, he now recognized potential for innovation that could distinguish Derby Farms in the industry. He began bringing potential investors to observe Joey's sessions with Thunder, speaking of pioneering trauma-informed rehabilitation protocols, as if they had been his vision all along. 3 months after their reunion, the transformation was remarkable. Thunder's coat had regained its glossy sheen, his eyes clear and alert rather than fearful. Most significantly, he now allowed Joey to groom him completely, stand beside him, and even lead him around the small paddock adjacent to his stall without any restraints. On a crisp autumn morning, Joey arrived to find Richard Whitfield waiting at Thunder's stall, an expensive leather saddle resting on the partition. "Time to move to the next phase," Whitfield announced. "Thunder needs to demonstrate rideability to recover his commercial value." Joey glanced at the saddle, then at Thunder, who had already tensed at Whitfield's commanding tone. "He's not ready for riding yet," Joey said firmly. "It's been 3 months," Whitfield countered, impatience edging his voice. "We've invested considerable resources in this rehabilitation." "Thunder will tell us when he's ready," Joey insisted. Forcing equipment on him now could trigger his trauma response. Whitfield's expression hardened. "I'm not suggesting force, but imagine the headlines. The horse given up for lost triumphantly returning to training. We could sell his story to Hollywood." "Thunder isn't a story to sell," Joey responded, stepping protectively closer to the horse. "He suffered severe trauma. Competitions mean pressure, expectations, strangers handling him. That would reverse all our progress." As their conversation escalated, Thunder grew increasingly agitated, shifting nervously and tossing his head, clear signals of distress that Whitfield either couldn't read or chose to ignore. "You seem to forget that this horse legally belongs to me," Whitfield finally snapped, frustration overcoming his calculated demeanor. "If I decide he's going to compete, that's my prerogative." He grabbed the saddle and moved toward Thunder with determined strides. The horse's reaction was immediate and visceral. He reared back, eyes wide with panic, a terrified whinny escaping his throat. Years of trauma associated with training equipment resurfaced instantly. Determined to prove his point, Whitfield continued forward, holding the leather headstall outstretched. "He needs to get over this ridiculous fear. It's just standard equipment." Whitfield lunged forward with the headstall, his patience exhausted. Thunder's reaction was instantaneous. The massive black stallion reared up, hooves slashing at the air, eyes wide with primal terror. The peaceful progress of months evaporated in seconds as Thunder's traumatic memories flooded back, triggered by the aggressive approach and the sight of the equipment that had once caused him pain. Joey moved without thinking, placing himself between the advancing Whitfield and the panicking horse. "Thunder, it's okay," he called out, his voice deliberately calm despite the chaos unfolding around him. "No one's going to force you to do anything." Thunder's hooves crashed back to the ground, his massive body quivering with fear. He snorted violently, head tossing as he backed toward the corner of the paddock. But something remarkable happened. Instead of bolting away or attacking as he once would have, Thunder oriented himself toward Joey, as if seeking protection from the boy. Whitfield halted, momentarily stunned by the intensity of the horse's reaction. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, still clutching the headstall. "He needs to accept basic equipment if he's ever going to be worth anything again." "Can't you see what you're doing to him?" Joey pleaded, not taking his eyes off Thunder. He raised his hand slowly, palm out, using the calming gesture that had become their shared language. "He associates that equipment with pain and fear." Thunder's breathing gradually slowed as Joey continued speaking in soft, measured tones. The horse's ears, initially pinned flat against his head in terror, slowly pivoted forward to focus on Joey's voice. Though still trembling, Thunder took a hesitant step toward the boy, deliberately turning his back on Whitfield and the threatening headstall. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. Several stable hands had gathered at a safe distance, drawn by the commotion. Sarah stood among them, her phone discreetly recording the entire interaction. The massive thoroughbred, legally Whitfield's property, had made his own choice abundantly clear. "Fascinating," Sarah observed, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. "Some interesting choices are being made today." She approached her father slowly, her confidence bolstered by the weeks of documentation and growing professional support. "Including yours, Dad. You can choose between continuing to treat living beings as properties to be exploited, or recognizing that some connections are more valuable than any legal contract." Whitfield's face flushed dark with rage and embarrassment. The horse's rejection stung more deeply than he would ever admit. Another failure in a lifetime of being second best in the racing world. He'd bought Thunder to compensate for his own failed riding career, to prove he could own what he couldn't achieve. Now the animal had humiliated him in front of his employees. "This emotional nonsense has gone far enough," Whitfield declared, tossing the headstall aside. "The horse is mine. The property is mine, and I won't be dictated to by a teenager and a stubborn animal." But his words lacked their usual authority. Something had shifted in the power dynamic, tangible, irreversible. Several of the stable hands were already drifting back to their phones, thumbs moving rapidly over screens. Within minutes, the incident would spread through their networks, the powerful stallion choosing the trailer park boy over his wealthy owner. Miguel stepped forward, breaking the tense silence. "Mr. Whitfield, perhaps we should continue this discussion later, when everyone is calmer, including the horse." Whitfield recognized the tactical retreat for what it was. Nodding curtly, he strode away, but the damage was done. Thunder remained beside Joey, occasionally nudging the boy's shoulder with his muzzle, a gesture of trust that spoke volumes. By evening, video clips of the confrontation had circulated widely across social media platforms. The footage was compelling in its simplicity. A frightened horse making a clear choice, turning its back on authority and equipment to stand beside the boy who had earned its trust. Comments flooded in, many from people with no connection to the equestrian world, all responding to the universal story of trust versus control. In his office, Whitfield paced furiously while his PR team and lawyers argued over response strategies. The video had gone viral beyond the equestrian community, attracting mainstream media attention and animal welfare advocates. "This is a disaster," his lead attorney stated bluntly. "The optics couldn't be worse. Wealthy businessman threatens traumatized horse. Horse chooses homeless kid. It's like a Disney movie come to life." "I didn't threaten the damn horse," Whitfield protested. "I was trying to restore its commercial value." "That's exactly the problem," the PR director interjected. "Every statement you make emphasizes the animal's monetary worth rather than its welfare. The public is responding emotionally to this story, not rationally." The attorney nodded grimly. "With the ongoing animal protection investigation and this viral situation, we need to consider damage control. If this goes to court—" "Court?" Whitfield interrupted, genuinely shocked. "For what?" "The investigation has uncovered multiple training incidents that could potentially constitute animal cruelty under Kentucky's updated statutes," the lawyer explained carefully. "With public sentiment turning against you, prosecutors might feel emboldened to make an example of Darby Farms." Whitfield collapsed into his chair, the full implications finally registering. Decades of reputation building, political connections, and social climbing could unravel over a boy and a horse. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd built his fortune taking shortcuts, using fear as motivation, treating living beings as machinery to be pushed to their limits. Now those same beings were pushing back. "What are my options?" he asked quietly. The PR director and lawyer exchanged glances. "Transformation," the PR woman said finally. "A complete narrative shift. You need to become the hero of this story instead of the villain." The plan they outlined was pragmatic if cynical. Whitfield would publicly transfer Thunder's ownership to Joey in a ceremony designed to maximize positive publicity. He would announce the establishment of the Miller Foundation for Equine Recovery, supposedly dedicated to rehabilitating traumatized horses. The foundation would allow Whitfield to appear philanthropic while diverting attention from the investigation. 3 days later, under clear Kentucky skies, Richard Whitfield stood before an assembled crowd of media representatives, local officials, and curious onlookers. Thunder and Joey stood nearby, the horse calm despite the gathering, his trust in the boy evident in his relaxed posture. "Darby Farms takes pride in recognizing exceptional talent," Whitfield announced with a practiced smile. "Joey Miller has demonstrated extraordinary understanding that deserves to be rewarded. Today, I'm not only transferring ownership of Thunder to Joey, but also establishing the Miller Foundation for Equine Recovery, dedicated to rehabilitating traumatized horses using the innovative methods Joey has pioneered." Cameras flashed as Whitfield handed Joey an ornate certificate of ownership and posed for handshakes. The boy accepted with quiet dignity, more focused on keeping Thunder calm than on the ceremonial aspects. What Whitfield didn't mention, and what Sarah would later reveal to Joey, was that the foundation existed primarily on paper, with minimal funding and no substantive commitment to reform. It was a shield against liability, not a genuine effort at change. But the momentum had shifted beyond Whitfield's control. The University of Kentucky, impressed with Sarah's meticulous documentation of Thunder's recovery, approached Joey after the ceremony. "We'd like to offer you a full scholarship to our veterinary medicine program," Dr. Matthews said, handing Joey an official envelope. "The package includes boarding arrangements that would allow you to keep Thunder at the university facilities." Joey stared at the letter in disbelief. "University? But I haven't even finished high school." "We can arrange for you to complete your diploma requirements while beginning prerequisite coursework," Dr. Matthews explained. "Your practical knowledge is already beyond many first-year students." Meanwhile, Dr. Jenkins approached with her own proposal. "I have 5 unused acres at my property since I retired," she told Joey. "A perfect place for traumatized horses to recover away from commercial pressures, with Thunder as the cornerstone of the program." These opportunities converged at a moment when Joey needed them most. His grandmother's treatment, finally made possible by a fundraising campaign organized by the Latino stable workers, had stabilized her condition enough for her to attend the ceremony. Seated in a wheelchair with an oxygen tank beside her, Betty watched with tears in her eyes as her grandson's life transformed. "Your mother would be so proud," she whispered when Joey knelt beside her chair. She always believed horses could heal people as much as people could heal horses. The days following the ceremony brought more changes. Miguel and several other Darby Farms workers began volunteering their free time to help establish what would become Thunder Sanctuary on Dr. Jenkins's property. Local carpenters and fencing contractors, moved by the story, offered discounted services. A feed store promised monthly donations of hay and grain. What had begun as one boy's connection with one traumatized horse was evolving into a community effort, a counterpoint to the exploitation that had defined Darby Farms for so long. Each nail hammered, each fence post set, represented a small rebellion against the idea that value came only from performance and profit. 6 months after the confrontation that changed everything, Thunder Sanctuary prepared for its official opening. The modest facility couldn't compete with Darby Farms' manicured perfection, but it offered something more valuable: space for recovery without pressure or deadlines. On the morning of the inauguration, before visitors and journalists would arrive, Joey and Thunder shared a private moment in the open fields of their new home. Without saddle or bridle, connected only by mutual trust, they galloped freely around the property's perimeter, no longer a poor boy and a broken horse, but 2 free spirits who had healed each other. When they paused atop a gentle hill overlooking the sanctuary, Joey leaned forward, whispering into Thunder's ear, "Remember when I read Hemingway to you? A man can be destroyed but not defeated. I think that applies to horses too." In response, Thunder nickered softly and turned his head to gently touch Joey's face, the same gesture that had marked the beginning of their unlikely friendship. From a distance, Sarah captured the moment on her camera. The image, later published on the cover of her scientific study on trauma and recovery in equines, would become an international symbol of a new approach based on mutual respect and deep understanding between humans and horses. While Joey and Thunder communed quietly on the hilltop, Richard Whitfield sat alone in his sprawling office, surrounded by trophies and ribbons that suddenly seemed hollow. The investigations into Darby Farms' practices had expanded, with former employees coming forward with new allegations. His standing in the racing community, once unassailable, was crumbling beneath the weight of changing public sentiment. As cameras prepared to document Thunder Sanctuary's opening ceremony, phones across town began buzzing with a breaking news alert: Darby Farms to be sold following investigation findings. Sarah Whitfield appointed to State Equine Welfare Board. The news alert about Darby Farms' impending sale flashed across Sarah's phone as she watched Joey and Thunder on the hilltop. She hesitated before sharing it, not wanting to intrude on their moment of peace. The serenity in both boy and horse stood in stark contrast to the turmoil that had defined their earlier relationship, a visual testament to what patient healing could accomplish. When Joey finally returned to the small office building that served as Thunder Sanctuary's headquarters, Sarah showed him the notification. "It's over," she said quietly. "Dad's selling Darby Farms." The board of directors forced his hand after the full investigation report. Joey absorbed this information with surprising calmness. What will happen to the other horses and the workers? The property's being purchased by a consortium that plans to convert it into a research and rehabilitation center, Sarah explained. "I've been asked to consult on the transition. They're keeping all the current staff. Miguel and the others will actually get proper benefits now." Before Joey could respond, Dr. Matthews from the University of Kentucky appeared in the doorway, holding an official-looking folder. His normally stern academic demeanor had softened into something approaching excitement. "Joey, I need to speak with you before the ceremony begins," he said. "The university board met yesterday regarding your situation." Joey tensed slightly. Though Whitfield's public relations stunt had granted him ownership of Thunder, his personal circumstances remained precarious. The trailer where he'd lived with his grandmother now stood empty most days, as Betty remained hospitalized. His education had been cobbled together through online courses and library books. "Is there a problem with the scholarship offer?" Joey asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Dr. Matthews shook his head, a rare smile breaking through his professional reserve. "Quite the opposite. The board was so impressed by the documentation Sarah provided that they've expanded the offer." He opened the folder, revealing official university letterhead. "A full scholarship covering all expenses, including special accommodations for Thunder on university property. You'd begin with a hybrid program, completing your high school requirements while starting introductory veterinary science courses." Joey stared at the document, momentarily speechless. "University? I barely finished 9th grade." "Your practical knowledge surpasses many of our graduate students," Dr. Matthews replied. "Formal education isn't just about classroom hours. It's about demonstrated understanding and application. You've shown exceptional abilities in equine behavioral science." Joey's thoughts immediately turned to his grandmother. "I can't leave my grandma. She needs me." "The package includes family housing," Dr. Matthews added gently. "When your grandmother is released from hospital, she could stay with you. The University Medical Center could coordinate her ongoing care." The possibility of stability, of a future beyond day-to-day survival, was almost too overwhelming to process. Joey had spent so long managing crises that planning ahead had become an unaffordable luxury. That afternoon, as Joey sat beside his grandmother's hospital bed, he struggled to articulate the opportunity before him. Betty, though frail, had regained some color in her cheeks since beginning the experimental treatment funded by the community's support. "University," she repeated, her eyes brightening. "Joey, that's wonderful. But I'd have to study a lot," he said, uncertainty creeping into his voice. "I've missed so much school. And with your treatment—" Betty's thin fingers tightened around his hand with surprising strength. "Listen to me, Joseph Miller. I didn't fight this cancer just to watch you sacrifice your future to sit by my bedside." Her voice softened. "Your mother always said knowledge and intuition should walk together. You have her intuition with horses. Now you need the knowledge to back it up." As Joey considered his grandmother's words, there was a gentle knock at the door. Dr. Eleanor Jenkins entered, her commanding presence somewhat softened by the casual clothes she wore instead of her usual professional attire. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, nodding respectfully to Betty. "I wanted to discuss something with both of you before tomorrow's ceremony." Joey gestured to the chair on the opposite side of the bed. "Please sit down." Dr. Jenkins settled herself before speaking. "I've been thinking about Thunder Sanctuary's future. The 5 acres I've offered is a good start, but what you've begun deserves room to grow." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I have a proposal. While you study at the university, I'd like to develop the sanctuary into a full rehabilitation program. My land, my resources, your methods." "I don't understand," Joey said. "What are you suggesting exactly?" A partnership of sorts, Dr. Jenkins explained. You'd focus on your education while spending weekends at the sanctuary. I'd handle the day-to-day operations, consulting with you on treatment approaches. Thunder would divide his time between the university facility and the sanctuary, serving as both your companion and our program ambassador. The proposal was generous beyond anything Joey had dared imagine. Why would you do this, Doctor? Jenkins's expression turned reflective. I spent 40 years treating horses whose injuries came from pushing them too hard, too fast for human glory. Before retiring, I promised myself I'd find a way to balance that ledger. She smiled slightly. Your work with Thunder isn't just about one horse. It's about changing how we approach these magnificent animals entirely. Later that evening, as Joey walked the perimeter of Thunder's temporary paddock at Dr. Jenkins's property, Miguel and 3 other workers from Darby Farms arrived in a pickup truck loaded with building supplies. What's all this? Joey asked, surprised by their appearance after hours. Miguel grinned, clapping him on the shoulder. We heard you might be accepting the university's offer. That means the sanctuary needs to be ready before you go. Pedro, a stocky man with calloused hands who had been one of the first to warn Joey about Whitfield's arrivals, nodded. We have 2 days off each week now. The new management is more, how do you say, humane. His smile revealed a chipped front tooth. So we use this time to build something good. But I can't pay you, Joey protested. Javier, the youngest of the group, laughed. Did we ask for payment, cabron? This is for Thunder, and for the others who will come. This pattern continued over the following weeks. Workers from neighboring farms began appearing on weekends, offering skilled labor or materials. A local carpenter volunteered to rebuild the small barn. A retired plumber fixed the water system. What began as individual gestures cohered into something more profound. A community reclaiming its connection to the values that had originally drawn many to work with horses. Meanwhile, a parallel development was taking shape at the university. Sarah, now splitting her time between veterinary studies and consulting on Darby Farms' transition, approached Joey with an unexpected opportunity. Dr. Levinson wants to formalize your approach into a teaching protocol, she explained, showing him preliminary documentation she'd prepared. The Miller method could become part of the curriculum. Joey's discomfort was immediate. I don't have a method. I just listen to what the horse is telling me. That's precisely what makes it valuable, Sarah insisted. You're not applying a one-size-fits-all technique. You're demonstrating responsive awareness, adjusting to each moment based on the horse's signals. The tension between academic formalization and intuitive practice wasn't easily resolved. For days, Joey wrestled with the uncomfortable feeling of his personal connection with Thunder being analyzed, categorized, and potentially distilled into classroom lectures. His concerns crystallized one afternoon when Dr. Levinson observed him working with a newly arrived rescue. A skittish mare who had been abandoned after an injury made her unsuitable for competition. Fascinating, the professor murmured, taking notes. Subject establishes baseline connection through proximity without expectation. Decreased cortisol response visible within 17 minutes of initial contact. Joey waited until they were alone before expressing his frustration. She's not a subject. Her name is Willow, and she's terrified because the last humans in her life disappeared when she couldn't perform anymore. Dr. Levinson looked genuinely surprised. I meant no disrespect. Scientific observation requires objective language. But that's my point, Joey countered. There's nothing objective about connecting with a traumatized horse. It's deeply personal for both of us. This philosophical divide might have widened had Dr. Jenkins not intervened with characteristic directness. She organized a meeting between Joey, the academic team, and several experienced horse rehabilitation specialists from across the country. For an entire day, they discussed the balance between scientific rigor and intuitive connection, between measurable outcomes and immeasurable trust. Perhaps, Dr. Jenkins suggested toward the end, what we need isn't a Miller method, but a Miller approach, a framework of principles rather than prescribed techniques. principles that remind us to see horses as individuals with their own timelines for healing. This subtle reframing satisfied both Joey's concern about reducing his work to a formula and the academic's need for transmissible knowledge. It acknowledged that while Joey's gift couldn't be perfectly replicated, the underlying respect for equine autonomy and trauma recovery could be taught. As these professional developments unfolded, Joey faced a more personal challenge. His grandmother's condition, though stabilized, remained precarious. The experimental treatment had reduced her tumor size, but her overall strength hadn't returned as hoped. "The hospital wants advance payment for the next treatment phase," Betty explained during one of his visits, her voice matter-of-fact despite the gravity of the situation. "Insurance still won't cover experimental procedures." Joey's heart sank. The community fundraising had covered the initial treatment, but requesting more felt impossible. He was preparing to sell his old truck, his only possession of value, when an unexpected solution emerged. The Kentucky Horse Racing Association, seeking to rebuild its image after the Darby Farm scandal, announced a new welfare initiative that included medical support for families in the equestrian community affected by serious illness. Betty, as the grandmother of the boy who rehabilitated Thunder, qualified immediately. This convergence of opportunities, the university scholarship, the sanctuary partnership, the medical support, seemed almost too perfect. Joey, accustomed to struggle, found himself uncomfortable with such good fortune. "I don't deserve all this," he confessed to Thunder one evening as they watched the sunset from their favorite hilltop. The horse nudged him gently, as if disagreeing with his self-assessment. Sarah, who had joined them for their evening ride, offered a different perspective. "Maybe it's not about deserving. Maybe it's about what becomes possible when people recognize value that was always there but overlooked." 2 weeks after the sanctuary's official opening, Joey sat at the small kitchen table in his grandmother's trailer, sorting through years of accumulated papers. The university housing wouldn't be ready for another month, and there were decisions to make about which possessions to keep and which to leave behind. Among the faded bills and old school reports, he discovered an envelope he didn't recognize, sealed, with his name written in his grandmother's careful handwriting. Below his name was a simple instruction: "To be opened when I am gone." The sight of it sent a chill through him. Had his grandmother prepared for her death even before her diagnosis? Should he respect her wishes and leave it sealed? Or had recent events changed the context of her request? As he turned the envelope over in his hands, weighing these questions, his phone rang with the hospital's number displayed on the screen. His grandmother had suffered a critical setback and was asking for him urgently. Joey nearly dropped the phone as he fumbled to answer it, his heart hammering in his chest. The nurse's voice was gentle but urgent. Betty had suffered a severe respiratory complication, and the doctors weren't certain how much time she had left. "She's asking for you, Joey. You should come quickly." The 10-minute drive to Oak Ridge Regional Hospital felt like an eternity. Joey parked haphazardly, the sealed envelope forgotten in his pocket as he ran through the sliding doors and down the now familiar corridors to the oncology wing. The night nurse, Martina, was waiting for him at the nurse's station. "She's stable for now," Martina said, her Dominican accent thickening with emotion. She'd grown fond of Betty over the months. "But it's good you came quickly. Room 3, same as always." Joey paused outside his grandmother's door, taking a deep breath to compose himself. When he entered, the sight of Betty nearly broke him. She seemed to have shrunk even further, the oxygen mask covering most of her face, making her appear impossibly fragile. But her eyes, those eyes that had never lost their fierce intelligence, found his immediately. "Joey," she whispered, lifting a trembling hand to remove the mask momentarily. "My boy." He rushed to her side, carefully taking her hand in his. "I'm here, Grandma. I came as fast as I could. My drawer." Betty gestured weakly toward the small bedside cabinet. "There's something I need you to have." Joey opened the drawer and found a small wooden box he'd never seen before. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, was a silver medallion in the shape of a running horse, its mane and tail flowing like liquid metal. "This was your mother's," Betty explained, her voice slightly stronger as she watched recognition dawn on Joey's face. She wore it in every competition, said it connected her to the horse's spirit. Joey lifted the medallion, feeling its weight, both physical and symbolic. "It's beautiful," he whispered, running his thumb over the intricate details. "There's more," Betty continued. "I've kept things from you, Joey. Not to hurt you, but to protect you, until you were ready." She paused, gathering strength. "In my closet at home, behind the winter blankets, there's a box. Your mother's journals, her methods, everything she knew about horses. I've saved them all these years." Joey stared at her, stunned by this revelation. "Her methods? You mean she wrote them down?" Betty nodded weakly. "Every discovery, every insight. Claire was methodical that way, intuitive with horses, but scientific in her documentation." A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "Sound like anyone you know?" The night deepened as Betty revealed more, how Claire had been developing a comprehensive approach to traumatized horses, how the racing establishment had dismissed her ideas as too time-consuming, too soft. How, before her death, she'd begun compiling her work for publication. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Joey asked, not accusingly, but with genuine wonder. "You needed to find your own way first," Betty replied. "If I'd given you her journals earlier, you might have tried to follow her methods exactly instead of discovering your own connection." Her breathing grew labored, and she replaced the oxygen mask momentarily before continuing. "But watching you with Thunder, it's like seeing Claire again. You found your way back to her wisdom on your own." Dr. Ramirez, the night physician, entered quietly to check Betty's vital signs. His expression was grave but compassionate as he adjusted her medication. "Try to rest, Mrs. Miller," he advised gently, before giving Joey a meaningful look that communicated everything words couldn't. When they were alone again, Betty reached for Joey's hand with renewed urgency. "Promise me something." "Anything," Joey whispered. "Promise you'll finish what she started. Not just with Thunder, but with all of it. The methods, the understanding. The world needs it now more than ever." Joey clutched her hand, feeling the fragile bones beneath paper-thin skin. "I promise, Grandma. I'll make you both proud." Betty's eyes filled with tears. "You already have. More than you know." She took a rattling breath, her gaze suddenly distant. "Claire would be so proud of you." She drifted into sleep then, her breathing steadier with the increased medication. Joey remained by her side until dawn broke, the silver medallion clutched in his hand, an unexpected bridge to his mother. When Joey finally returned home, exhaustion weighed on him like a physical burden, yet sleep was impossible. He went directly to Betty's closet, pushing aside the neatly folded winter blankets to find a cardboard box that had yellowed with age. Inside were 5 leather-bound journals, their pages filled with his mother's neat handwriting, along with folders of photographs he'd never seen. For the next 14 hours, Joey lost himself in his mother's world. The journals documented Claire Miller's journey from conventional trainer to pioneering advocate for trauma-informed equine care. Page after page described techniques that Joey had independently discovered with Thunder: the importance of non-demanding presence, the power of voice modulation, the significance of allowing the horse to initiate contact. "Physical contact is secondary to energetic connection," Claire had written in one entry. "The horse must feel your intention before accepting your touch. Force creates compliance, but patience creates partnership." Joey's hands trembled as he read these words, so similar to what he'd instinctively felt with Thunder. There were detailed observations of horse behavior, carefully documented case studies, and proposed protocols for various types of trauma: physical abuse, abandonment, accident-related PTSD. Accompanying the journals were photographs: Claire with various horses, her face alight with the same connection Joey had felt with Thunder. In several images, she wore the silver medallion, now resting against Joey's chest. The final journal entry, dated just a week before her death, outlined her plans for a sanctuary dedicated to horses society had discarded as unmanageable. Dawn was breaking when Joey finally closed the last journal, his mind reeling with discovery. He wasn't just continuing his mother's work. He was completing a circle that had been interrupted by tragedy. The phone rang, jolting him from his contemplation. It was the hospital. Betty had stabilized overnight and was asking for him. 20 minutes later, Joey entered her room to find her sitting up slightly, looking marginally stronger than the night before. "You found them," she said immediately, noticing the medallion around his neck and the journal in his hand. Joey nodded, pulling a chair close to her bed. "It's like she's been guiding me all along without my knowing it." Betty's eyes filled with tears. That's exactly what she would have wanted. For you to find your own path back to hers. She patted his hand. "Now tell me about the sanctuary plans. I want to hear everything." Despite her doctor's stern warnings about exertion, Betty insisted on attending the official inauguration of Thunder Sanctuary 2 weeks later. The event had grown beyond Joey's modest vision into a community celebration. Local businesses had donated refreshments, neighboring farms sent representatives, and equine specialists from 3 states traveled to witness what many were calling a revolutionary approach to rehabilitation. The morning of the inauguration dawned clear and cool. Joey arrived early to find Miguel and the other workers putting final touches on the main barn, which had been transformed from Dr. Jenkins' aging structure into a thoughtfully designed rehabilitation space with open stalls and natural lighting. "For good luck," Miguel said, handing Joey a small carving of a horse made from oak. "My grandfather made these for protection." Joey accepted it gratefully, touched by the gesture. "Thank you for everything, Miguel. None of this would exist without you and the others." The older man shook his head. "No, muchacho. We provided hands, but you provided heart. That is the harder thing." By mid-morning, cars lined the country road leading to the sanctuary. Joey had arranged for Betty to arrive last, giving him time to prepare Thunder for the crowd. The horse, sensitive to Joey's emotions, seemed to understand the significance of the day. He stood calmly in the paddock nearest the ceremony area, occasionally nickering softly when Joey passed. At precisely 11, a medical transport van arrived carrying Betty in a wheelchair, an oxygen tank beside her. Despite her physical fragility, her eyes shone with fierce pride as Joey wheeled her to the front row of seats facing the small podium. Thunder, watching from his paddock, did something remarkable. Without prompting, he approached the fence closest to Betty and extended his head toward her in gentle greeting. Joey held his breath, watching as his grandmother raised a trembling hand to touch the velvety muzzle that had once been unapproachable. "Hello, beautiful boy," Betty whispered. "Thank you for bringing him back to us." Joey's speech was brief but powerful. Standing beside Thunder, who remained calm despite the crowd, he dedicated the sanctuary to 2 women who taught me that patience and love are more powerful than force and control. My mother, Claire, whose methods I've only now discovered I was following, and my grandmother, Betty, who preserved that wisdom until I was ready to receive it. As he spoke, Joey noticed unfamiliar faces in the audience, families clutching photographs of troubled horses, veterans with service animals, children from therapeutic riding programs. The word had spread far beyond Oak Ridge, drawing people who needed exactly what Thunder Sanctuary offered: hope for the seemingly hopeless. Dr. Jenkins followed Joey at the podium, announcing the formal establishment of the Miller Protocol as the sanctuary's guiding principle. Representatives from 3 universities expressed interest in conducting formal research on the rehabilitation techniques. A local school district proposed a program for at-risk youth to volunteer with the horses. Throughout it all, Betty watched from her wheelchair, occasionally wiping tears from her eyes. When the formal ceremony concluded and guests began touring the facilities, Joey knelt beside her. "Are you tired? Should I take you home?" Betty shook her head, reaching for his hand. "Not yet. I want to see everything first." Her eyes, though shadowed with exhaustion, held a profound contentment. "Claire would be so proud of you." Joey helped her wheelchair navigate the gravel paths as they toured the rehabilitation stalls, the gentle training ring, the open pastures where recovering horses could eventually roam freely. Thunder followed along the fence line, never straying far from Joey's side. As sunset approached, the crowd thinned, leaving only a few volunteers helping with cleanup. Betty, finally yielding to exhaustion, allowed Joey to help her back to the transport van. As he secured her wheelchair, she reached for his hand one last time. "I've seen enough," she said softly, her voice barely audible above the gentle evening breeze. "You've done what Claire dreamed of, what I dreamed of for you." Her eyes drifted closed, a serene smile settling on her face. "I can rest now." 2 weeks after the funeral, simple but dignified, attended by more people than Joey had realized knew his grandmother, he finally returned to the trailer to sort through Betty's remaining possessions. Among the neatly folded clothes and carefully preserved mementos, he found an envelope he hadn't noticed before, addressed to him in Betty's handwriting, "For when I am gone." The envelope trembled in Joey's hands as he stared at his grandmother's familiar handwriting. "For when I am gone." The simple phrase carried the weight of finality, of conversations permanently ended. For several moments, he just held it, feeling the slight texture of the paper against his fingertips, wondering what final messages Betty had left for him. With careful movements, he broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. The letter was dated exactly 1 year before her death, as if Betty had somehow sensed the timeline of her remaining days. "My dearest Joey," it began in Betty's precise handwriting. "There is a story I've never had the courage to tell you while I lived. Perhaps it was wrong of me to wait. But some truths are heavy burdens to place on young shoulders." Joey settled into Betty's old rocking chair, the letter illuminated by the fading afternoon light streaming through the trailer window. "Your father was not the worthless vagabond who abandoned your mother, as I've allowed you to believe. His name was Jack Winters, and he was a remarkable man, a Cherokee horse trainer whose methods were considered radical by the racing establishment. Your mother met him at a rodeo in Tennessee where he was demonstrating traditional Native American horsemanship. They fell in love almost instantly, recognizing in each other the same reverence for horses and rejection of conventional training methods." Joey's breath caught in his throat. For his entire life, his father had been a nameless shadow, deliberately unmentioned and unremembered. Now suddenly, he had not just a name, but an identity, a heritage. Jack and Claire worked together for nearly a year, developing methods that combined her scientific approach with his ancestral knowledge. The racing community mocked them. Worse, many couldn't accept the relationship between a white woman from a respected Kentucky family and a Cherokee man who challenged everything they believed about training. The pressure separated them briefly. The letter continued, revealing how Jack died in an accident while working with a dangerous stallion, never knowing Claire was pregnant with Joey. Claire had decided to raise her son alone, incorporating Jack's teachings into her own work, but never speaking his name out of a complicated grief that mixed love, guilt, and anger at a world that had made their relationship so difficult. "I should have told you sooner, Joey. You have inherited gifts from both your parents, Claire's methodical mind, and Jack's intuitive connection to horses. What you've discovered with Thunder isn't coincidence. It's your birthright from both sides of your family." Joey read the letter 3 times, each reading revealing new layers of understanding about himself. The instinctive methods he'd used with Thunder, the silent presence, the respect for the animal's autonomy, the gentle songs he sometimes hummed. These weren't just random approaches. They were echoes of traditions passed down through generations of his father's people, somehow embedded in his own instincts despite never having been explicitly taught. The following morning, Joey sat at the small desk in the sanctuary office, his mother's journals spread before him, the silver medallion hanging around his neck, and his laptop open to research on Cherokee horsemanship traditions. The connections were unmistakable. Claire's scientific observations often mirrored traditional practices Jack had shared with her. The importance of approaching from the side rather than head-on, the power of stillness, the recognition of horses as beings with their own medicine and wisdom. "I thought I'd find you here," Sarah said, appearing in the doorway. She paused, noticing the intensity of his focus. "Is everything okay?" Better than okay, Joey replied, looking up with bright eyes. I found something. Someone. He gestured to the empty chair beside him. I have a father. Over the next hour, he shared Betty's letter and his discoveries about Jack Winters. Sarah listened intently, occasionally asking questions that helped Joey process his newfound heritage. This explains so much, she said finally. The methods you use with Thunder, they've never fit neatly into either traditional or modern approaches. They're a synthesis. Joey nodded, turning the silver medallion between his fingers. I want to honor this properly, not just for Thunder, but for all the horses who come here. In the months that followed, Thunder Sanctuary evolved beyond Joey's initial vision. He deliberately incorporated elements of Cherokee tradition into the rehabilitation program. Ritual moments of silence before working with new arrivals. Healing circles where volunteers and horses gathered in shared space without demands. Songs in languages ancient and modern that seemed to resonate particularly with traumatized animals. The sanctuary gained national attention when a horse transport arrived from Texas, carrying an immense black stallion that 3 traditional rehabilitation centers had failed to reach. Midnight, as he was called, had attacked multiple handlers and was scheduled for euthanasia when a YouTube video of Thunder's recovery reached his owner. Joey approached Midnight's case with the integrated wisdom of both his parents. From Claire, he applied careful documentation and progressive trust-building exercises. From Jack's traditions, he brought patience, storytelling, and a profound respect for the horse's autonomy. Within 6 weeks, Midnight allowed Joey to touch him. Within 3 months, the stallion that had been deemed demonic by traditional trainers was leading children on gentle walks around the sanctuary grounds. As word spread, Thunder Sanctuary began receiving requests not just for horses but for traumatized humans as well. A pilot program partnering with the county foster system brought teenagers who had experienced abuse and abandonment to work alongside recovering horses. The parallel healing processes created profound resonance. Children who wouldn't speak to therapists would whisper their secrets into the attentive ears of horses who understood trauma without needing words. One afternoon, while observing a session between a particularly withdrawn 14-year-old girl and a previously aggressive mare, Dr. Jenkins commented, "What you've created here goes beyond rehabilitation, Joey. It's restoration, of trust, of connection, of hope." Joey watched as the girl, who hadn't spoken a full sentence since arriving 3 weeks earlier, gently brushed the mare's mane while murmuring something only the horse could hear. "They recognize something in each other," he replied. "The broken recognizing the broken." By the 1-year anniversary of Thunder Sanctuary's opening, the modest 5-acre property had expanded to 15 thanks to neighboring land donations and grants from equine welfare organizations. What had begun with 1 boy and 1 traumatized horse had grown to include 17 full-time resident horses in various stages of rehabilitation, a waiting list of 20 more, and weekly programs serving over 50 children and veterans. The academic community had taken notice as well. Sarah's formal study on Thunder's rehabilitation, complete with detailed documentation of Joey's methods, had been published in the Journal of Equine Veterinary Science, challenging long-held assumptions about recovery timelines for traumatized horses. 3 universities had established research partnerships with the sanctuary, sending graduate students to document and analyze the effectiveness of what was now formally known as the Miller-Winters Protocol. Darby Farms, meanwhile, had undergone its own transformation. Following Richard Whitfield's forced resignation and the property's sale, the once prestigious training facility had been converted into the Kentucky Equine Research Center, with Sarah serving as its executive director. The circular training ring where Thunder had once been pushed beyond his limits now hosted gentle liberty work with rescued racehorses, and the stables had been redesigned to prioritize natural light and social interaction between horses. On the morning of the sanctuary's anniversary celebration, Joey rose before dawn and made his way to the special paddock where Thunder now spent his days. The horse, hearing Joey's familiar footsteps, trotted to the fence to greet him, his once dull coat now gleaming in the early light, his eyes clear and trusting. "Good morning, old friend," Joey said softly, offering an apple from his pocket. "Ready for a special ride?" Without halter or rope, Joey opened the gate and Thunder followed him willingly to the small tack room. Unlike the ornate racing equipment that had once triggered his terror, Thunder now accepted a simple hand-woven halter adorned with beads in traditional Cherokee patterns, a gift from a group of elders who had visited the sanctuary 3 months earlier, recognizing and honoring Joey's heritage. Together they set out along the perimeter trail that circled the sanctuary's expanded property. Joey rode bareback, the silver medallion of his mother catching the rising sun while the beaded halter created by his father's people guided their path. They moved as one being, communication flowing through the subtlest shifts in weight and breath, a dialogue beyond words. At the highest point of the property, Joey brought Thunder to a halt. From this vantage, they could see the entire sanctuary, the rehabilitation barns, the gentle training rings, the open pastures where recovering horses mingled freely. In the distance, a van was approaching, likely bringing the day's first visitors for the anniversary celebration. "We've come a long way," Joey murmured, leaning forward to stroke Thunder's neck. "Both of us." Thunder nickered softly in response, his ears flicking back to catch Joey's words, then forward again toward the approaching van. Something in his posture shifted, a subtle alertness that Joey had learned to read over their years together. The van stopped at the main entrance, and 2 figures emerged, a man in a white coat helping a small figure from the passenger side. Even from this distance, Joey recognized the distinctive movements of Dr. Ramirez, the kind physician who had cared for his grandmother. The second figure was unfamiliar, a girl, perhaps 12 or 13, her body language closed and defensive as she reluctantly followed the doctor toward the main office. Joey watched, curious about this unexpected arrival. As if sensing his question, Thunder turned his head slightly, dark eyes meeting Joey's with the profound understanding that had defined their relationship from the beginning. "Looks like we have a new visitor," Joey said, gathering the reins. "Let's go meet them." As they descended the hill, Thunder moving with confident, measured steps, Joey noticed a second vehicle pulling in behind the van, a horse trailer, larger and more secure than standard transport. The warning flags and caution signs plastered across its exterior suggested its occupant was considered dangerous. Joey's heart quickened with recognition. This combination, a traumatized child and a dangerous horse arriving together, echoed the beginning of his own journey with Thunder. The circle was completing itself, offering a new opportunity to pass forward the healing he and Thunder had found together. As they approached the main yard, Joey could now see the girl clearly. Thin, with haunted eyes that darted nervously around the unfamiliar surroundings, her hands buried deep in the pockets of a hoodie several sizes too large. Dr. Ramirez spotted Joey and waved urgently, relief evident in his expression. "Joey, thank goodness you're here," the doctor called. "This is Marisol. She hasn't spoken since witnessing her parents' death 3 months ago." He lowered his voice as Joey dismounted. "And that trailer contains what the Texas authorities are calling the most dangerous stallion in the state. Both were being transported to separate facilities when I suggested, well, I remembered what you and Thunder accomplished." Thunder, as if understanding the gravity of the situation, moved forward deliberately and lowered his head to the girl's eye level. Marisol, who had been staring fixedly at the ground, looked up in surprise at the gentle giant now offering silent greeting. For a brief moment, something flickered in her empty expression, a spark of recognition, perhaps, between one wounded soul and another.